They left me out. My stepdaughter packed up my wife and her father. They went to meet the fiancé's family without me. At the party, she looked at me like I was a stranger and said, "You were never my father." I whispered, "Okay, I got it." I walked away slow. I kept my mouth shut. The next morning, they stormed into my apartment demanding answers. When her fiancé looked at me, he said one sentence. The words stopped the room. I felt the floor drop under my feet. Everything changed in one breath. My name is Thomas. I'm 55. I live in Houston. My block hums like a radio. On Sundays, you hear praise from Ms. Darlene's porch. Kids play double dutch on the sidewalk. Barbecue smoke curls down the street. The city smells like collard greens and fresh coffee. Laura and I had a quiet life. We kept our rhythms. Mornings meant her toast and my black coffee. I'd cut the grass on Saturdays. She'd wash the car and laugh when I forgot the wax. Our place was small, a two-bedroom with a worn leather couch. Pictures lined the mantel, church photos, graduation ones, a faded portrait of a family we had tried to be. Jasmine, my stepdaughter, lived with us most of the week. She worked nights. She liked R&B and bright nail polish. She called me Tom when she wanted gentle and Boss when she wanted a ride. We had jokes. We had rules. I was the man who fixed the dryer and signed permission slips. I was the man who showed up to her school when her mom couldn't. Laura worked at the clinic. She loved her laughter loud and her heels high. She kept things neat. She carried herself like she deserved better. I loved that about her. We had dinners with church friends. We cut up bills together. We handed out plates on street cookouts. The whole block knew us. Some nights the house felt close and warm. The fan whirred. Her hair smelled like coconut oil. Sometimes we would sit in silence and listen to the refrigerator hum. I would watch her face while she braided Jasmine's hair. I thought those small scenes were proof we were whole. But there were cracks I didn't see. Small things. A voicemail I missed. A closed tab on the laptop. A laugh that was too quick. The kind of little cold that slides in without a sound. I felt it like a draft under a door. One morning, Jasmine left for what she called a family meet. She kissed Laura. Laura smiled and squeezed my shoulder on the way out. I watched them go. Something in the way Laura turned made me uneasy. I shrugged it off. Maybe I was tired. Maybe men notice less. I made coffee. I folded my shirt. I told myself everything was fine. Then Jasmine's voice on the phone cut through my chest. "Dad," she said, "you weren't invited." The words were soft, loaded. I felt my heart hitch. I told myself not to show it. I said, "Okay." I lied. I walked to the window and looked at the street. I could see people moving like they always do, but something heavy was coming. The air changed. I didn't know what it meant, but I felt the first crack. The first red flag was small. Laura started staying late at the clinic. She said it was extra work. I believed her. I wanted to believe her. But the phone started to change shape in her hands. It would buzz and she would swallow her smile. She'd step into the bathroom to talk. She'd leave the screen face down. She started locking the bedroom door when she slept. At dinner, she picked at food like a new taste didn't fit. Her laughter grew sharp and small. She asked me questions about money I had never seen before. "Did we save for the van?" she asked. "Did you move anything to your account?" I answered slow. The house got quieter. Jasmine began to text in the corner, thumbs moving like a secret Morse code. I tried to ask. I would slide into the living room and say, "You good?" She would look up like I'd interrupted a prayer. "I'm fine," she said, but her smile didn't reach her eyes. She shifted in her chair. I would hear her phone vibrate. The vibration felt like a warning. There were nights she came home like someone else, perfume heavier than usual, clothes that hugged a different silhouette, new shoes left by the door. Once I found a lipstick mark on a glass at the sink. I told myself it was nothing. I told myself to calm down, but my hands started to pay attention to things. I watched her voice change. Her speech tightened when she lied. Her excuses had edges. Overtime became double shift, then clinic meeting. She started to avoid eye contact during family dinners. She sat farther from me. When Jasmine folded into the couch and said, "You weren't invited," it landed like a stone in my chest. I started to record small things in my head, not to trap her, to remember. The way her foot tapped at red lights, the way the corner of her mouth twitched when she smiled at a text, the nights I woke to the sound of the lock and her soft sigh in the dark. I turned these things over like coins. Neighbors noticed changes too. Ray from down the block would ask if everything was cool. "You look tired, Tom," he'd say from the barber. Miss Darling asked at church, "You all right?" I lied and said I was fine. Black men don't always say much. We steady the house with silence, but silence had weight then. It felt like the heavy part of a sermon about trust. One evening Jasmine came home pale. She sat at the kitchen table, hands clasped. Laura walked in and kissed her forehead. I felt heat rise and fall. Jasmine said nothing at first. Then she spoke in a voice I recognized, the one she used when she wanted truth. "Mom, why didn't you invite him?" she asked. Laura froze, the air tightened. "Who?" she asked. Her face slid into a practiced lightness. "Your fiancé," Jasmine said. "He wanted to meet the family. You didn't tell Tom." I kept my fork in my hand. The spoon made a small ringing noise. In my head everything slowed. Laura excused herself and left the room. I watched the door close. My heart ran small circles. Why was I invited? Why would my own wife go without me to meet a man who wanted to join our family? That night I lay awake. The ceiling fan cut a slow circle. I thought through our years. I played back small moments like old tape. I remembered a check I signed that didn't match the account balance. I remembered a withdrawal I couldn't explain. I remembered a call to a clinic number at midnight. I remembered, faintly, the name of a man Jasmine mentioned once. It sat like a memory in a pocket I had never opened. I began to watch more, not like a detective, like a man who didn't want to lose what he'd built. I watched her when she thought I wasn't looking. I listened for the shape of lies. I watched the way she caressed her phone screen. I listened to the tone in her voice that came when she lied to herself. Then the tip came, a receipt left in the glove box of the car, a restaurant name I didn't recognize, a florist charge on the card that wasn't for our anniversary. I felt the sting of each small proof. They added up like pebbles underfoot. I started to collect them in my head. I started to sleep with my keys in my pocket like a man preparing to leave. But I didn't leave. I waited. I watched. One Saturday morning, Jasmine came by to pick up a dress. She hugged Laura and left. Later she returned with a look I'd never seen. She walked into the kitchen and said, "They met the family without him, Mom. You didn't tell him. Why not?" The question hung. Laura's smile changed. She opened her mouth. Her words came slow. Her fingers found the table edge. For the first time I saw fear cross her face. I leaned forward. I wanted to ask everything. I wanted to scream, but I breathed. I let the quiet sit heavy in the room. I told myself I'd wait for proof. I told myself I'd be calm. That night after they left, after the house went still, my phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. A voice I didn't know left a message. "If you want the truth, come by Marin's tonight at 9. No name, just a place. My thumb hovered over the call back. I felt a coldness that felt like a decision. I told myself to go. I told myself that if I walked into that bar I might break everything. But if I didn't go I would never know. I grabbed my jacket. The city night smelled like rain and grease. I locked the door behind me. I didn't know if I was walking into proof or a trap. I only knew one thing: I couldn't be left out of the puzzle any longer. I hit the light and left the house. In the dark my chest beat steady. The night swallowed my steps. I did not know what I would find, but I was no longer content to be blind. Marin's was a small bar 2 blocks from the church. Low lights, old soul records, the kind of place where men tell truth over a beer. I sat at the end of the bar. The laminate felt warm. My hands smelled like coffee and worry. I ordered water. I watched the door. A man in a faded cap slid into the stool beside me. He didn't look at me like a stranger. He had steady eyes. He handed me a small envelope. "Heard you might want to know," he said. No more. He left. Inside the envelope was a photo. It was taken at a restaurant. Laura was in it, laughing. Her hand held a man's throat like a joke between lovers. A second photo showed Laura and the same man leaving a building in the early morning. There were receipts, hotel names, a card slip with a name I recognized from the clinic records. My mouth went dry. The proof felt like a stone in my hands. My mind tried to name the hurt, betrayal, stupid, foolish, but the photo had a smell. It smelled like perfume and a lie that had been kept warm. My thumb traced her smile in the picture. I felt sick and steady at once. I folded the photo and left the bar before the record stopped. When I came home, the apartment smelled the same. Vanilla from the candle, jasmine sneakers by the door, the couch cushions pressed by the living room where we had shared TV shows. It all looked ordinary. That made the photos sharper. I put the envelope in my jacket pocket. I sat at the kitchen table and breath slow. I waited for the right time. I didn't want to fight at midnight. I wanted something quiet. I wanted to make sure I did it clean. I cleared a space in my mind like a chessboard. I made calls. I found an accountant friend, Marcus, who owed me a favor. I asked him to check bank flows. He said he'd look. A few nights later, I woke to the sound of quiet talking. I slipped out of bed. The bedroom door was slightly open. The light from the hall made a sliver across the floor. I saw the silhouette of Laura in the bathroom. Her phone buzzed in her hand, her voice in a whisper. I could hear a laugh that I did not know. I decided then, I would not let my chest do the talking. I would not rush. I would gather. I would act like a man who wanted results. I checked the bank. There were transfers to an account I did not recognize, payroll lines with odd bonuses. Laura had been moving money, small amounts at first, then larger sums. The numbers looked clean to a casual eye. To me, they looked like a trail. I printed everything, statements, receipts, the photos. I put them in a folder and labeled it Truth. The folder sat on the table like a challenge. Marcus called back and confirmed what I suspected. She's been funneling funds for months, he said. One account goes to an LLC. The LLC pays personal advances. It's not just gifts. His voice was flat. He asked if I wanted him to help. I said yes. That night I placed the folder where Laura would find it. I put it on the pillow where she lay. I sat in the living room and listened to the refrigerator hum. I listened to the house settle. I could hear Jasmine's breath in the next room. Laura came out, a towel around her shoulders. She paused when she saw the stack. Her hand trembled just a bit. She looked at me with that practiced smile. Her eyes tried to be casual. She picked up the folder and leafed through it. Her face changed in the span of a single breath. I watched her walk back into the bedroom. The bathwater in the tub made a small sigh. She came out with a robe on. Her voice was quiet. "Tom, we need to talk," she said. The weight of those words felt like the beginning of a trial. I was calm. Calm was my armor now. I said, "All right." I told her I knew. I laid the photos on the table. I slid the bank statements across like cards. I told her about the envelope. I told her about Marin's. I spoke in short sentences. I let each fact land hard. Her face crumpled. For a moment she did not speak. Then she started to tell a story that tried to make love sound like a mistake. She said it was loneliness. She said it was attention she thought she deserved. She tried to make a cheap apology into a story about needs. I felt something inside me break and then strengthen. "Who is he?" I asked. Simple. She gave a name that cut the air. It was a man from a clinic list, a man who had been coming by late, a man whose name I had seen in the credit card slip. "Why?" I asked. Laura's voice shook. "I didn't want to hurt you," she said. She spoke of moments, of loneliness, of feeling unseen. She said, "I didn't think it would go this far." Her eyes held something like regret. There was sorrow. There was also fear. Jasmine heard us. She burst into the living room, eyes rimmed red. She pointed at me. "You lied to me," she said. Her voice was small and sharp. "You were never my father," she said again, like a wound reopening. Her words were brittle. I felt the room tilt. My hands were steady on the chair. I thought of every quiet moment I had given that family. I had been the man who signed permission slips, the man who taught Jasmine to drive, the man who paid for her first car. Those memories hit me like a lighthouse in a fog. That night I realized everything was about to change. I felt the air close in. Laura's apology would not fix it. Photos would not close the door to what had been done. There was work to do, decisions to make. And I had one more secret I had not told them. I had started to gather proof not to shame. I had started to gather proof to protect myself. The next morning would be the beginning. When the sun rose, I was already awake. The kitchen light cut a strip across the floor. I made coffee that tasted like iron. My hands moved on their own. I had a plan that would not be loud. Revenge does not always have to scream. Sometimes it acts like a slow storm. Step 1. Secure the money. I closed accounts and moved funds into safe places. I set up a separate account in my name. I signed papers at the bank early while the lobby was empty. I felt the weight of each signature. Each pen stroke made the decision real. I did it with quiet focus. I told no one. Step 2. Gather witnesses. I talked to Marcus more. I asked him to look deeper. He found phone records I couldn't access. He helped me trace where the money went. It linked to an LLC and then to personal accounts. I printed everything. I put copies with a lawyer I trusted. His name was Ms. Green. She was sharp and straight. She held my folder and looked at me like a man would look at a puzzle that needed finishing. She asked for patience. I promised it. Step 3. Maintain the mask. I kept being calm. I hugged Jasmine. I made tea for Laura. I let my voice be soft. I smiled when neighbors waved. I went to church and sang like a man who still believed. On the outside, I looked like the same man who fixed the dryer. On the inside, I was building. I also watched for more truth. The more I watched, the more threads I found. Laura had been receiving gifts, jewelry, notes, a line of secret expenses that read like a second life. There were dinners at quiet places and nights at hotels. There were investments in small things that had nothing to do with family. Each line fed the picture I was painting in my head. I found an old title in the storage closet, a deed to a small property in the name of the LLC. I found emails that showed transfers to a relative of Laura's father. I photographed everything. My fingers buzzed from the load of it. The folder thickened. Each page made me colder. Then there was the other truth. A name kept popping up in the records. The same name Jasmine had said in passing. It was the fiancé's name. I stared at it until the letters blurred. How did this tie together? Was the fiancé involved? Was he part of the loop? Or was he the one hurt by the web? I did not know. Questions were coiled. I had to be careful. I set small traps. I left a small sum in an account tied to household bills and watched the withdrawals. I watched the nights Laura left. I recorded dates. I took photos of receipts with timestamps. I kept everything legal. I did not break the law to prove a lawbreaker. I kept the right on my side. I reached out to my cousin, Andre, who worked in estate law. He agreed to review everything in exchange for a favor. He said, "Tom, you're calm, that's your advantage." I liked the way he said it. My calm was not weakness. It was a blade. In the evenings, I pretended to be asleep. I listened to the furnace. I listened to Laura come in and out. I listened to Jasmine call her fiancé late, the voice low with excitement. There were messages I let sit unanswered. I let them rot where she could see. In the quiet, I made notes. I tasted each plan. I also began to plan the human end of it. I would not strip her of dignity in front of everyone. I wanted consequences. I wanted fairness. I wanted to show the truth without turning myself into the villain. I prepared letters. I prepared a meeting with Ms. Green to file for separation. I prepared a few words to tell Jasmine when the time came. I wanted to keep my head when everything around me was losing theirs. Friends started to notice. Ray the barber said, "You look different, Tom." He did not know the depth. Marcus called and said, "We got enough to freeze some accounts." I felt a small thrill. It was not triumph, it was relief. I had a path. A week later, I set the stage. I invited a small group over under the guise of a family dinner. I cooked collard greens. I made sweet potatoes. I set the table with plates we had used for years. I wanted normal. I wanted a last night of what we once were, so the truth would have contrast. We sat, the fan hummed. Jasmine talked about wedding plans. She held Laura's hand. Laura's laughter was thin. I felt the folder heavy in my mind. I had Ms. Green on speed dial. I had Marcus ready to freeze accounts if needed. I had documents at the ready to show the court. When dessert came, I asked for quiet. I stood. The room softened. I have something to say, I said. My voice was calm. I carried the folder in like a man carrying a Bible. I put it on the table between them. The paper rustled. I felt eyes like heat. Before you say anything, I said, know this: I tried to hold us together. I let the sentence settle. It did. I told them I had proof. I told them I loved the family. My words were slow and low. I watched Laura shrink. She stood then, her face margarine with panic and something like anger. Tom, she said, you can't. Her hand trembled. Jasmine's face was white. You were never my father, she cried. I swallowed and looked at them both. I felt rage, but I used it like a tool. I told them what I was going to do next. I said I would file. I said I would make sure the finances were straight. I said I would protect Jasmine from being used. I kept my voice level. That night when they left, the weight in the air was a thing you could touch. I locked the door and sat at the table with the folder and a cup of coffee gone cold. I had started a chain I could not stop. The next morning would be the confrontation that would change everyone. I was ready. I felt like a man who had buried a hurt and found a map under the dirt. The morning of the confrontation, some of the neighborhood felt like it held its breath. I walked out to get papers from Ms. Green. The wind smelled like rain and a street vendor's coffee. I felt steady. I had practiced my words. Laura came into the kitchen dressed like she had somewhere to be. She paused when she saw the papers on the table. Her face was pale. Jasmine stood in the doorway with her fiancé. He looked nervous and proud, like any young man with plans. She said I wasn't her father, I thought back. The words still stung. I swallowed and read the room. I invited them to sit. I kept my tone even calm and measured. That calm pulled at people. You could see it. My hands were folded. I started with facts. I showed them the bank statements. I showed the pictures. I showed the transfers. I showed the receipts for hotel rooms with names that matched messages I had seen. I did not scream. I did not plead. I let the paper speak. Laura tried to interrupt, but I held my hand up. Let me finish, I said. Listen. My voice was low, but it had steel in it. The fiancé looked between us. His jaw tightened. He seemed like a man who felt his future wobble. I watched Laura's face as the truth landed. She shifted colors from denial to panic. She reached out as if to grab something that would save her. Tom, you don't understand, she said. It wasn't like that. Jasmine's hands trembled. She stood and slammed her palm on the table. You lied to me my whole life, she said. Her voice broke on the last word. I felt her pain like a current. Her fiancé went pale and took a step closer to her. His hand found hers and squeezed. Then the moment came. I held out one more sheet, a document with invoices. The fiancé looked down. His face changed. He swallowed. He looked up at me. My heart dropped because his eyes had a look I couldn't read. Then he said the words that would freeze the room. I didn't know, he said. He looked more at Laura than at me. I didn't know about any of this. He sounded small. He seemed betrayed like the rest. His voice cracked. But then he looked at me in a way that made the room tilt. You're Thomas, he said slowly. You're the man from the photos with my mom. Silence slammed the air. For a beat no one moved. The fan hummed like a coin. Jasmine's face contracted. Laura shrank back like she'd been slapped. My mouth went dry. The man's words had a weight I hadn't expected. My hands felt heavy. Wait, I said, what are you saying? He swallowed. Those photos, he said. My mother showed me this picture once. She said she dated a man who used to fix cars around here. She said he raised her son a little. She said his name was Thomas. I never thought, his voice broke. I thought she was joking. Jasmine's knees buckled. She looked at me like the ground beneath her had turned to glass. "Tom," she whispered, "is that true?" The room spun. Memories flashed. A woman in a parking lot years ago, a short conversation about a boy, a name that had sounded casual. The life I had led suddenly had threads I hadn't known. The fiancé's mother had been someone I saw long ago. Had I been part of a story I had not finished? But Laura's face was full of other things. Not just betrayal, but exposure, fear and shame and calculation. She started to speak fast. "It's not what you think." She reached for the fiancé. "You have to understand." The fiancé stepped back. His jaw clenched. He looked at Jasmine, then at Laura, and then at me. The silence in the kitchen turned brittle. I realized then that this was not only about money. This was about identity, about who we were to each other, about lies woven so long they felt like truth. I kept my voice calm. "Jasmine," I said, "I have loved you like a daughter, every scraped knee, every graduation. I didn't keep you away, I was here." My chest ached. "I tried to be your father." Jasmine's eyes filled. She turned to her fiancé. "Why didn't you tell me?" she whispered. He shook his head. "I didn't know," he said again. He looked like a man who had been handed a script he could not read. Laura finally let out a sound that was half sob. "I thought I was protecting you," she said to Jasmine. "I thought I was protecting us." She looked at me with pleading. "Tom, please." But pleading could not put back the pieces. The community's expectations, the history, the money, they all sat at the table now. The fiancé's sentence had opened more doors than I expected. The room felt like a stage where actors had forgotten their lines. I closed the folder. "This is over for me," I said. My voice was steady. "I'm going to do what I need to do." I told them I would file for separation. I told them I would protect Jasmine. I told them I would talk to Ms. Green. The words read like a verdict. The fan kept humming as if nothing had happened. They left like people walking out of a storm. The door shut behind them with a dull click. I stood in the middle of the kitchen and felt the quiet press down. I had asked for truth. The truth had arrived, but the cost was higher than I thought. I sank into a chair and let the folder cool on my knees. The next steps would hurt. I knew that. I had to be ready. The days after the confrontation moved like winter. People in the neighborhood watched us in small ways. Ray gave me a nod at the barber. Ms. Darlene whispered as we passed the church. Word spreads quick. The truth had a face and a name now. Ms. Green moved fast. We filed for separation. The court papers were clean and sharp. She froze accounts tied to the LLC. Marcus helped gather evidence to show the money trail. When the judge read the statements, the pattern was plain. The transfers, the hotel stays, the gift cards, they laid the story bare. Laura's defense was thin. She tried to explain the transfers as loans. She tried to soften the words with tears. The court saw the invoices, the receipts, the pattern of secrecy. The judge frowned and said words that felt like a sentence. "There is clear financial misconduct," he said. He ordered restitution and a protection of assets. I felt a small relief. But I did not want to ruin lives. I wanted fairness. I wanted to heal. I asked for a portion of the assets needed for Jasmine's future. The judge agreed that Jasmine should be protected. He assigned temporary custody of certain shared accounts to a neutral trustee. He ordered Laura to undergo counseling and financial reconciliation. It was a legal tidy-up, not revenge for vengeance's sake. Community reaction was a river with sharp turns. People took sides. Some whispered that Laura had been selfish. Others said marriage can break in quiet ways. At church, the pastor spoke about truth and healing without naming names. Friends called. Some offered support. Some walked away like they had been burned. Jasmine was crushed. She sat in my living room one afternoon and cried into my worn t-shirt. "You lied to me," she said, wiping tears with the back of her hand. She looked at me, and in that face I saw the child who once learned to ride a bike in my yard. "Why didn't you tell me the truth about anything?" she asked. I told her the truth I had kept. I explained my silence. I thought love sometimes means holding the fort, I said softly. But I see now silence can be its own chain. She listened. We talked for hours. We ate takeout and passed tissues. Forgiveness doesn't come fast, but truth opens a door. Laura's fall was not instant. She lost some standing in her circles. Her father, who had been proud, kept his distance. She found herself alone in places where she once led. She realized the cost. The house was on the line. She had to account for expenses. The community's whispers were loudest in the barber shop and softest at the church doors. The fiancé left. He could not stand the complicating web. Jasmine and he called off the engagement. She told him she needed time. He left town for a while, packing his pride like luggage. I watched Jasmine's life pause like a train at a signal. It hurt. It felt necessary. In the months that followed, I paid lawyers and counselors. I took care of paperwork so Jasmine could finish school. I made sure the electric stayed on. I walked with her to financial meetings. I taught her how to ask questions, how to check a balance, how to read a contract. I became practical. I became patient. There was a morning, weeks later, when I sat on the porch and watched the sun lift over the block. The light hit the house next door and made it glow. I felt a warmth that wasn't the old comfort, but a different kind, a quiet, hard-won peace. I had lost illusions. I had gained a map. Laura tried to rebuild. She worked odd jobs. She apologized in ways that were sometimes earnest and sometimes clumsy. People forgave. Some did not. She had to live with what she did. The court's orders kept her accountable. The money she had taken had to be repaid. The house was restructured so Jasmine would be secure. I walked away from the marriage with more than papers. I walked away with the knowledge of who I was when everything else fell. I kept my dignity. I kept my calm. I kept my love for Jasmine intact. The community watched me and learned something about quiet strength. One night I drove to the lake by myself. The water was still. The city lights blinked like teeth across the dark. I opened my palms to the sky and let the air in. I felt tired. I felt heavy. But I felt a deep clarity. Revenge had not been about cruelty. It had been about setting the ledger straight. It had been about protecting a young woman I loved. In the end, I did not make Laura pay more than necessary. I did not humiliate her beyond the truth. I protected Jasmine. I moved forward. The house smelled different now, lighter. I had changed the locks and my name on the lease. I walked the threshold like a man who had survived something sharp. People said I was strong. Some called me cold, but strength is not loud. Strength is a steady hand when everything around you shakes. I found my voice again. I found my center. I had been betrayed. I had been left out. But I also made sure no one could take my life's small things without answering for it. If you're listening and you feel left out of your own life, know this. Calm will be your clearest weapon. You don't need to explode. You need a plan. I learned to gather facts, not gossip. I learned to protect the young and the honest in my home. I learned that love doesn't mean you let someone eat your peace. I won't pretend it didn't hurt. It did, but pain can be a teacher. I forgave slowly on my terms. I walked away when I had to. I walked forward when it was time. Today I sit with Jasmine on Sunday mornings. We still go to church. We still laugh on the porch. The neighborhood still hums. If betrayal hits you, breathe. Keep your calm. Get help. Gather truth. Protect what you can. And remember, dignity is not given. You take it back quietly with steady hands.